section B in the morning. By now, you should have all seen the syllabus. You should all have it. I'll go over it briefly before we begin. A few notes first. I'm going to hand out these name tent cards. So if you could just write your first name in big letters. I have markers. Whatever you write here is what I'll call you. I don't even look at the seating chart, so just write whatever you want me to call you, and that's what I'll call you. If we could just fill these out, I would be grateful. I think I have enough for everyone. If I don't, I'll bring more in class next week. Here. Over here, marker. And put the rest of these over here. All right, just make sure to stick around in class. Thank you. All right, we'll worry about that later. Another treat for you. It's a custom of mine to give cookies the first day of class. It started many years ago because my birthday was my first day of teaching. It was back in 2012, so it was a while ago. So I always bring cookies. So I have these. I'll give them at the end of class, okay? I don't want to do it now because COVID, but I'll do it. I used to actually give cookies where you take and you eat, and people eat in class. It was magical, but we don't get to do that anymore, unfortunately. I understand the bookstore is out of books. So if you don't have the book, you should have emailed me already. If you didn't, please do, and I can send you a PDF of the first reading for class. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. Let's start by going through the syllabus for a few moments, and I think that will help put the class into perspective. Okay. First off, iClicker. Do you all have the app on your phones? Please sign in. I won't remind you. I'll leave it running throughout class. Just please sign in once you get here. We have a revised COVID policy in place for yet another semester, it seems. If you're not able to come to class for whatever COVID-related reason, which invariably happens, I live stream it. This camera here goes right to YouTube, so there are probably actually several of you watching it online as we speak. Hello. You can watch it live, or you can watch it on the streaming server after. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Just watch the class within 24 hours of the class. So I think that's fair. That means you don't fall too far behind. If you could please mark yourself present when you finish watching the class. So I leave the attendance open for 24 hours after the class finishes. Just mark yourself present, and then everything's easy. I don't have to deal with any administrative work. Okay. But I think most of you are here. We have in attendance, I have 76 people here, 2 absent. That's actually pretty good. Okay. The syllabus has excuse me, all the information that you are going to need. I post a lot of information, so please read through carefully. The exam, which is what everyone always cares about, will be on May 4th. Completely open book. Bring whatever you want. It will not help. I know you don't believe me. I have another marker if anyone needs. No one believes me, but it will not help you. Your notes won't help you. So bring whatever you want. I don't care. It will not help you. No one believes me, but trust me, you'll see it in a couple weeks. I've posted all of my old exams. They're all up there, going back to, my goodness, 2013. That's a long time. Probably a bunch of you were in middle school at that point. Use these. Use them to your advantage. Again, I'll take attendance on iClicker. Please sign in. I won't remind you. I don't want you to say, Professor Blackman, I forgot to sign in. I hate those emails. You're all attorneys soon. As attorneys, you have to keep track of your own hours. It's a very modest thing to ask to sign in your own without having to track you down. Office hours. Do you have class right before this? You have a break. Okay, good. And do you have class right after this? Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, so if you want to come by before class, I'm in 623. If you want to come by after class, you can. Although I found in the past that generally people try and get on their commutes for after 3:30, so they don't stick around. But I'll stick around. If I don't see anyone, I'll go. But before or after class, happy to meet with you. If you send me an email, I'll probably say come meet with me in person or maybe on Zoom if it's whatever the protocols of the day. Emails, emails from students, I found you're rarely asking the question you think you're asking. Usually you think you're asking question A, and after a minute, it's like, no, you're really asking question B, C, and D. And so I find the email responses are often counterproductive. So I'd like for you to meet with me. We couldn't even see you face-to-face for a year, so now we're here, and we can all talk in person and figure out how to go about our learning. YouTube. As I mentioned, there's a camera right here. Hello, YouTube. Everything's live streamed. And I've also live streamed all of my classes going back for about 8 or 9 years. I encourage you to watch a prior year's lecture before you come to class. Some of you told me you've already done this. I am fairly predictable. I often don't repeat myself. Now, if you really want to be proactive, I teach this same class in the morning at 9 a.m. So if you want, I can't believe I'm giving this away. You can watch my morning class during your lunch break. I don't recommend it. You don't have to, but it's there. Or you can watch it from last year. Probably try to go back to 2020 before we went on COVID, because once we went to Zoom, everything was a disaster. No, it wasn't that bad. Just it was very different. But watch a prior lecture. I think you'll get a lot out of it. You'll see on the syllabus, there are these two notations, class notes. So see where it says you guys are section A. We don't use Canvas or Lexis. Everything's on here. So don't worry about checking Canvas or Lexis. So if you click this note for class A, there'll be a folder. You'll notice most of the files are blank. That's quite deliberate. I will fill these in as the semester goes along. I put different things, pictures, maps. We'll be doing polling questions later in the semester. There'll be polling questions for you to answer. Just check this before class. Just be familiar with it. It's nothing too urgent. I don't put anything too critical here, but you will get some useful information. Okay, going back to the syllabus. Case summaries. Okay. I'm in the process of actually writing a book about important property cases. So I wrote these summaries for you. These are free. You don't have to pay for them. I'll post these usually right before class. I want you to do the readings, but these sort of distill what I think is important from the cases. And you can read these at your discretion, but I think you all should try to do it at various points. It will probably answer most of your questions, if not all, and then you come to class and ask those remaining questions. Okay. Did everyone get the name cards? Are we out? Are there any more papers? No, but any more cards? I don't think I have enough. Okay. I have markers here, but no more cards. Cards there? These markers don't work. Okay. This is a fail. Okay. I'll get more for Monday or for Tuesday. So if you don't have it, that's just fine. Just tell me what your name is, and I'll order more markers. Sorry about that. All right. So going back to the syllabus. Okay. So you have the class notes. Sorry, I thought I have 170 students this semester. This is the most I've ever had in my life. I actually didn't order enough because I thought I had more like 140. So we have very big sections. So more students than I expected. So I apologize. I ordered these a couple months ago. And I didn't bring enough. Okay, my apologies. Yeah, I think you have 85 in your section. Is that right? Yeah, it's big. Okay, going back to the syllabus. So you have the class notes. You have the case summaries. Here's the password for the streaming server. You're welcome to use that. I think YouTube's better, but it's your call. Whatever you want to do. See any questions so far? Okay, no questions so far. All right. The readings here are precise, if you've noticed. Maybe you have. I gave very precise readings for each class, and that's quite deliberate. I don't fall behind. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. I don't fall behind. I start and I finish where we're supposed to every class. The advantage is you know what you're supposed to be reading. What that also means is if you're not reading where you're supposed to be, I'll know very quickly. So you have to always be on top of the readings. There's never going to be a doubt. Oh, what page is Blackman up to? Where are we going to be? No, there's no doubt. This, right? So page 3 through 19, and then on Tuesday we got page 27 through 52. I've also tried to keep the readings manageable, rarely more than 25 or 30 pages, very rarely. Manageable. The class recitation is probably a little bit different than you're used to. Every professor, I think, tends to do a little bit different job. It's sort of the curse of being a law student, but you have to deal with it. I tend to call on one person. I think Kate will be first. You do warning. And I go up and down the rows. Up and down the rows. Up and down the rows. Everyone gets 1 or 2 questions. If you don't give me a right answer, I can come back to you at a time you may not know. So there's an incentive to be prepared. This keeps people engaged. Some people hate it. Some people love it. But if you're not prepared, I'll find it very quickly. Even with a class this big, I can probably call about 40 or 50 of you in one class. So you're on call every class, every other class. And wherever I finish Tuesday, I'll resume at the next person over on next class. Okay. So, and you can't move around. Don't do. One semester, this one student, she would always go to the bathroom when she was next, and I knew she was doing it. It got so obnoxious. So one time, she was walking. Like I called her at the door. I was like, "Okay, you're up now," and she didn't even sit down. And it was a bad situation. But don't go to the bathroom. I know what you're doing. It's you're all adults. You don't need to get a hall pass, whatever. But if you see that it's coming to you, just take it, and you'll know what hits you. Okay. But again, it's for your benefit. It's hard to stay focused. Better now in person than on Zoom, but it's easier to stay focused. All right. I think most of you have written your name on the cards. I'm sorry again, I don't have enough. If you wrote it in pen, I probably can't read it. So if the markers ever exist, we'll get you new ones next week. But just big letters, first name, so I can see. I can't read the little pen things with first and last name. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. You can call me Josh. I'll call you by your first name. I don't like titles. I don't like last names. Never like formalities. You know, if you're good with a suit and tie, but I don't like titles. It's my thing. All right. Any questions? Okay. Let's get started. Property. I must start writing feverishly, right? And it's good to be back. I have to say, we just had all the Zoom semesters. It's so good to be back in person. I never thought I'd take for granted having live students, but now when I have live people, I'm actually happy. So it's very good. Hope we stay back. I know no guarantees happens tomorrow, but at least we're here for one class. It's funny, I actually had not taught a class in person since March of 2020 because I had a sabbatical in the fall, and then we had Zoom before that. So my very last class might have actually been in this room. I can't recall. And we went for spring break. And the student asked me, "Are we going to be back after spring break?" I said, "I don't think so." And then it was like the longest spring break ever. Seriously, it was like, we'll come back for spring break. Yeah, right. Bizarre. All right. Property. Property, I think, is going to be a little bit different than some of the other 1L classes. You've taken torts. You've taken criminal law, you've taken contracts, and it seems at least in these other classes there's like a authoritative statement of the law. You have the UCC, right? The Model Penal Code. You have the restatement, right? You have these sort of authoritative statements of the law. Property, unfortunately, is not like that. Property is an area of law where there's lots of competing authorities. There's not always going to be a majority rule. Often there are many rules. And it torments students for generations to have to sort of keep track of all these competing rules. And I think the very first case we have today, the Johnson case, is an illustration of this. And you're saying, my goodness, why on earth are we reading this case? Trust me, there's a reason. It will make sense in maybe half an hour or so, but it will make sense, I promise. All right, so let's start with a brief reading. Kate, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that's always my first seat, so I should have told you in advance. But don't worry, you have an easy assignment. If you could just flip to page 667. I know it's on your reading, it's short. I want you to just read something. It's short, you'll be fine, nothing will happen. Okay. It's page 667. Kate, you see where it says a gentleman from Louisiana? A New Orleans lawyer? Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Okay. So just read for me where it says a New Orleans lawyer, if you could, please.
Okay. A New Orleans lawyer had searched title back to 1803 for his client, a federal agency. The agency asked who owned the land prior to that date. The lawyer replied, "Gentlemen, I am in receipt of your letter of the 5th of this month inquiring as to the state of the title prior to the year 1803. Please be advised that in the year 1803, the United States of America acquired the territory of Louisiana from the Republic of France by purchase. The Republic of France previously acquired title from the Spanish crown by conquest. Spain acquired title by virtue of the discoveries of one Christopher Columbus, a
Genoese. He's from
Genoese.
Genoa. It's a place in Italy.
sailor who had been duly authorized to embark upon his voyage of discovery by Isabella, Queen of Spain. Before granting such authority, Isabella, a pious and cautious woman, obtained the sanction of His Holiness the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
The Pope is the vicar of earth on earth of Jesus Christ, the only Son and heir apparent of God. God made Louisiana.
Right. And people always chuckle. So, okay, let me ask you a follow-up. This is a softball, I promise. And Monet's on deck, right? Why did I ask you to read this as the very first thing in property? You're in class 5 minutes. Why am I asking you to read this?
To kind of get like the history of how, I guess, New Orleans got to where it was.
Okay. Monet, what exactly is this history showing?
The beginning stages of like who owned the land is kind of like I want to say arbitrary. I don't know if I'm using that right, but it's like there's no real origin. They just kind of took it, and then after that, people took it from each other, and then they decided, okay, I have a title, so that means I own it.
Okay, so we start with the present, right? We all agree that this letter's from some years ago, but at present, right, the United States acquired Louisiana from the French in the 1800s, right? That's not disputed, right? And then we go back one layer more, and it says France acquired it from Spain by conquest. What does that mean?
They took it by force.
So France and Spain engaged in some sort of battle, and France won, and they got Louisiana territory, right? Is that, how do you pronounce your name? Samaya. Okay, so then before France and Spain battled, how did Spain get it?
By discovery?
Okay.
I believe by discovery.
Okay, so we have conquest, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got, see what I'm getting at, right? We got discovery. Now, Samaya, something seems to be missing in this chain of title between Spain discovering it and Jesus, right? There's a gap in that chain of title. What might be missing there, Samaya?
Possibly the original occupants of the land.
Yeah. So native people, huh? Are they mentioned here in this discussion?
No, sir, they're not.
No, they're not. So Tamika?
Yes.
Tamika, why do you think this lawyer excluded the native people who were living in this area for however long they were living there for?
Most likely because they viewed them as occupants and not owners, so they didn't.
Oh, very good. You're hinting at the Johnson case, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So let me ask you a follow-up, Tamika, please, if I can. Do you think the lawyer wrote this letter thought it was even important enough to mention the native people that were occupying that land?
Honestly, no.
Why not?
Because I don't think that he felt they were valid owners of the land.
Aha. Okay, very good. Thank you. So I always give this assignment, which is on page 600, whatever, right? The first 5 minutes of class. I think it illustrates a few principles, which I can sort of give to you broadly, right? First, when we're talking about property, right, we're talking about land, soil, earth, water, whatever it happens to be, right? Later in the semester, we'll get to things like animals and oil and minerals and diamonds and things like that. But at the most basic level, when I say property, I'm referring to a piece of land. And most land is very old, right? Maybe new land is developed, a volcano erupts in the ocean, right? You can think of an example like that. But for the most part, whatever land is on planet Earth has been here for a very, very long time. Someone owns that land today. Someone else owned it 10 years ago. Someone else owned it 100 years ago. Go back 1,000 years. However you want to go back, some humanoid, some being was occupying that land. But generally, in our legal system, we only go back about 200-300 years, maybe 400 years if you want to be really diligent. But after a certain point, we just don't trace the title back any further than that. I think the reason why is sort of what Tamika was saying a moment ago, right? They're perhaps just not important enough to mention, right? So when you're studying these topics, you have to keep in mind that when we say who acquired the property, if we trace it back enough steps, we sort of hit a brick wall where we just don't have records of who owned it, or the record simply didn't care who owned it. It could be either situation. Right. So much of property, much of this entire semester that you're going to be sitting suffering with me with, is answering a question of who owns property and when do they own it, right? Who owns it and when do they own it? Maybe I own it today and you own it tomorrow and she owns it a month from now, right? But we have to try and determine at a given point in time who owns a piece of property. That becomes important in our first case because if you don't own something, you can't sell it. Sounds obvious, right? But let me state it the other way. You can't sell something you don't own, right? Can any of you guys say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to sell Blackman's computer," right? No, you can't do that. You could, you're a thief, right? By the way, in this class, people frequently sell stuff they don't own, and that's why it goes to court. But here we have a case with competing claims to the same piece of property. Person A and person B both claim that they own the property. And person A and B claim they got it from different sources. And then it falls to the court to decide which claim is stronger. Okay, any questions so far? It's so good seeing active people, not like little blue hands popping on your faces. That's just, I'm sorry. It's just, it's good to be back. Things you never thought you take for granted, you take for granted. So I'm grateful. All right, Clark, you're up. Give me the facts, please, in actually, it's our only case, Johnson gets McIntosh.
Okay, so Johnson in 1775, I believe, acquired a possible land from in Virginia from the Yankashaw Indian tribe.
Okay.
And passed it on along to his heirs. In 1818, McIntosh bought 11,000 acres of that land from Congress.
Good.
And Johnson there sued McIntosh to recover the land, but it was they sued him.
Okay. So we have a conflict, right? So we have Johnson. Johnson purchased huge tracts of land from Indian tribes in present-day Illinois. Okay, and Clark, just remind us, what year was that land bought from the Indian tribes?
1775.
Okay, so is that Alexia? Alexia, just, you don't have to know much about American history, but what's significant about 1775? Why might the year be a little significant? What happened the next year? Yeah, the Declaration of Independence, right? So the United States declared independence from England in 1776, right? July 4th. Alexia, do you think this was a risky purchase from Johnson to buy this land when there were all this revolutionary stuff going on? You got to talk up a little bit. People can't hear in the back. Take advantage of who?
Of like before the land had a rightful owner trying to kind of.
Okay, good. Is that Maddie? Maddie, what was the risk when Johnson made that transaction? What could have possibly happened?
Well, in acquiring the land from the British, I guess the rights to the land.
Well, he didn't acquire from the Brits. He acquired from the tribes.
Well, in buying it from the Native Americans, the next year when we had independence, the land, I guess, is given from the British to America.
But was that clear? Do we know exactly what happened?
Not really.
So it was uncertain, right?
Sure.
Okay, this is what you might call land speculation. If you heard the phrase speculator or speculation, I'm sure you've heard this phrase, right? Where someone engages in a land transaction that's risky, where he doesn't even know if things will work out. He has no idea, right? He has no clue if things are going to work out, but he buys a plot of land on the speculation or on the possibility that things will work out. The risk is he buys this land and becomes worthless because the new American government says, screw you, we're not going to honor your claim, which is actually what happened, right? But he didn't know this at the time. Now, is it Armand?
Yeah.
Okay. Armand, let me ask you a question. Do you think he paid fair market value to the tribes?
Likely not.
Yeah, why did you say likely not? That's just
Because based on the reading and just the idea of Native people at the time, he probably didn't see them as being equal to him, so he probably didn't offer them an equal amount of compensation.
right. And who knows what fair market value even was? This was wilderness, right? You think of Illinois or Chicago. Right? No, this was wilderness. This was undeveloped land. Who even knew what could even become? It was a new nation, right? But we can say, I think safely, that they probably got ripped off. I think we could, we can say that with some confidence. All right, so Johnson goes ahead and engages in this land speculation, and he buys. And we're talking large amounts. This is not like a little plot. These are huge. Look at the map, right? These are huge chunks of land from the tribes. Excuse me. Okay. And Claire, what happens with McIntosh? What does McIntosh do?
He stays at Congress and social media.
Okay, so when did McIntosh buy the land from Congress? By the way, this is what it looked like, just for a moment. Yeah, see it. You see my picture online, and it used to look like this. He said shorter hair, but COVID. Right. So Claire, what happens when does McIntosh buy the land from the government?
I don't have the year, but sometime after.
Okay, I think it was 1808. Okay. Okay. Now, Claire, when McIntosh bought the land from the government, do you think he was even aware of this earlier transaction from Johnson?
No.
We don't know, but he probably has no idea, right? But then a conflict arises. Sophia, what's the conflict that arises between Johnson and McIntosh? Why are we even in the courts?
So when he died, his son.
But who died?
Johnson.
Johnson died.
His son inherited the land.
Oh, just not to criticize, just for everyone. Try to avoid pronouns like he and she. Just give me the name because there are lots of people in cases, and it's easier to just say Johnson or plaintiff, right? All right, go ahead. So Johnson died.
Yeah, so Johnson died, and then he tried to have his son Joshua inherit the land.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, right.
And so when that happened, he wanted to evict McIntosh.
So Johnson tried to eject or evict McIntosh from his land. Why would he object evicting him? What's the legal claim? You studied 100 times in torts.
What's it called? Trespass?
Trespass. Right. So this case, which is a fairly significant case on Indian law, arose from a simple trespass action. Right. Johnson goes, McIntosh, you're trespassing my property. And then, Alyssa, what is McIntosh's defense to the trespass claim?
He says that he owns it.
He owns it. You can't trespass on yourself. You're the trespasser, right? It's yours. You'll see this a lot. Property and torts, there's a lot of overlap. You see it throughout the semester. So it's a trespass action, 100% standard. So in order to decide who's trespassing on whom, the court has to decide who actually owns these plots of land. And in order to decide who owns these plots of land, is that Hanny?
Yeah.
How do they decide who owns a plot of land? There can only be one, right? How do they decide who owns it?
For whoever has the title.
Oh, students love saying that. I not like the follow-up question. What's the title?
The owner of the land.
So whoever owns the land defined by ownership. So you gotta be more specific. What does it mean to have title?
Have bought the land.
Well, they both bought it. They both bought it. Right? The Johnson bought it from the Indians and McIntosh bought it from the government. So they both bought it. That help me out.
I think that's where the issue kind of arises is whose word is higher than the others.
Whose word is higher? What do you mean? I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, if they have to believe the U.S. government.
Is it a matter of belief? They both have, there's no doubt of what happened, right? These transactions occurred. There's not like a dispute of fact. The facts are undisputed.
I think it depends on whether McIntosh bought it from after they had already acquired after 1770.
Well, we know that. Johnson bought it in 73, and then McIntosh bought it in 1808. So Johnson went first. Kimmy, how do we decide who's trespassing here? Rightful ownership, that's like title, right? How do you know who the rightful owner is? They both bought it. There's no dispute. They both bought it at different points in time. How do you decide who, in your words, is the rightful owner? Discovered it. Neither of them discovered it. The Indians were there. Isabella? It's my daughter's middle name.
I guess I thought that was what the court was trying to decide, like, who was,
But how do you decide?
I guess it's like, back.
Well, they
Maybe, like, both of their
can both.
to go
Isabel, help me out here. Is it possible for both conveyances to be valid? How? But only one person owns property at a time. You can't. It's like you selling my laptop, right? It's not. It doesn't work. Only one of them is valid. Pierre, help us out.
So obviously only one valid, and that's the main reason why Johnson wanted basically the court to reaffirm his rightful ownership, which came first, but in the end, it kind of played out the other way.
Okay, but you're still dancing around my question. How does the court decide which transaction was valid? The Johnson one in 73 or the government one in 1808?
Well, from the reasoning that I could get from reading the case, it's decided on whoever got it directly from the U.S. government.
Okay, so let's try this a different way. I didn't see a name tag. Is it blocked by your various bottles and cups and things? Maria, okay, we got a deli. Okay, so Maria, let me ask you this question. Let's say, okay, so I mentioned my daughter. My daughter's 3 years old, right? And she's very smart, and she decides to sell you my laptop. She might one day. She's very smart. And you say, okay, sure, I'll buy it from you, and you give her money for it. Is that a valid transaction?
No,
Why?
because she's not the owner of the laptop.
But even more basic, simple contract law. My daughter is quite young, about 3 years old.
There's no mutual assent.
And why is there no assent? Good. Can the-
Because one, well, she doesn't own it, so like, you can't really like form the idea, like 3 years old.
Can a 3-year-old make a contract?
No.
Why? What do we call that? They lack. Thank you. Good. You remember something from last semester, right? They lack capacity to form a contract, right? We all agree, right? If you make a contract with a 3-year-old, it doesn't matter if they own it or not. They lack capacity to sell. Okay. So is that Deborah? Why did I bring up the issue of capacity here? How does that relate to the Johnson case?
The biggest argument in the opinion was basically that in order to kind of determine who does have a valid claim to the land, they had to kind of rule out capacity of the Native Americans.
Oh, you see it now. Were the Native people, or let me say it differently, did the Native people have the capacity to engage in this transaction to Johnson?
According to them, no, because they didn't own the land, they just occupied it.
And why do they lack this capacity?
Because they saw them as lesser.
Now we're talking. Okay, good. See, it took like 25 people, but I got it, right? I'm moving pretty quickly. I told you, I move quickly. So it's kind of like you see the firing squad coming for you, and you have to sort of just wait and just you're ready for it. But once it passes, like, oh, you can take a breath, right? Okay, thanks, Deborah. That's exactly right. This is a weird case to assign for the first day of class. I promise you, the rest of the semester is not like this, right? It's almost like we start with the most controversial case of the semester on day number 1, and it's all boring stuff afterwards. It's just how the semester lines up, right? But much of this opinion, which uses really harsh language, they're heathens, savages, they know war. I mean, really stuff you would never want to see in an opinion by a Supreme Court judge. The reason why this language is in there is to make a point very clear that these people, the Native people, simply lack capacity to engage in property transactions. No different than my 3-year-old daughter. All right. Now, Maddie, let me ask you a follow-up question to that, please, if I can. By the way, any questions? I always have to it's actually an adjustment. There's no more hands, so I have to actually pause for questions. I didn't have to, just do a hand that'll pop up. Questions. This class is going better than my first one. I'm back my rhythm. It took a little bit to adjust. Okay. So, Maddie, let me ask this question, please. What would have happened if, let's say, Chief Justice Marshall had maybe a different opinion where he said, well, these Indian people may be different than us, but they're smart, right? They have their own society. They may be a little different than us, and they're able to make contracts. They're able to form mutual assent, right? They're able to do these various things. What would have been the consequence of that type of a Supreme Court decision if the court had come out and said, yeah, these Native people can engage in contracts. They're different than us, but they're able to form agreements. They make treaties and stuff. No problem. What would be the consequence of that decision?
They would give the right to own their own property.
And
then we couldn't take it from them, basically.
and
Then we wouldn't have the land that we have.
and what would happen to the entire republic?
It wouldn't be an entire republic. It would be Native American land. And we wouldn't be colonized, technically. And we could quote unquote discover.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for my end, right? Yeah. No, exactly right. Marshall was not writing on a blank slate here, right? Had the court come out and said, yes, the transactions with the natives were valid, that would have disturbed the title to use your word title, right? Disturbed the title, the ownership of virtually the entire continent. And at one point, Marshall says something like, it's too late to reconsider this doctrine. You notice that point where he said that? It's like, it's too late for us to sort of revisit that issue. And again, Marshall was not writing on a blank slate. Is that Andres?
Yes.
Andres, do you remember, it's in the reading, what the state of Virginia did to native claims?
Basically an old
Nullify them, yeah. So if there are any native claims from native property transactions, were those valid in Virginia? Wiped out. Do you think Congress gave, and this is sort of implied, it's not stated directly, do you think Congress gave any priority to the transactions for the native people?
No.
Why not?
Priority to the focus because basically.
Did Congress give any sort of significance to the native transactions?
At that time, no, because once the war for independence ended, right, all that land now became populated in the United States.
Very good. And how do we know, just one last question for you, how do we know that the U.S. government didn't care about this other transaction to Johnson? We know
They gave the land.
the same thing, right? The fact that the government gave the same plot of land to McIntosh shows that they did not care about the earlier in time conveyance to Mr. Johnson. Right? That's not directly stated, but I think we can imply that or infer that from the case. All right, questions so far? Yeah, in the back. And I'm sorry I don't have your name cards. I really apologize. I thought I had enough, and I guess I didn't order enough. I feel bad. But what's your name?
My name's Chad.
Chad. Okay, so what's your question?
My question is this case taking place at the beginning of Manifest Destiny, or is this before?
I don't remember when the Manifest Destiny concept started. I don't know that since middle school. But it's at this early stage. Let me just sort of give some background. Back in the 1820s, Illinois was the Northwest Territory, right? This was all the way out west. There was a lot of land going out to the Pacific Ocean that was yet to be settled. And I think Marshall was looking forward to the coast and saying, well, we need a doctrine that will actually permit that to happen. Right? An alternate ruling in favor of the tribe, in favor of the Johnson Purchase, would have basically put a huge roadblock in pursuit of what you call manifest destiny from coast to coast. But good question. Yeah, and what's your name? Armand. Yeah.
My question is just more about classroom procedure. Would you prefer us to wait until these question sections?
No, whatever you want.
If she's answering, I can raise my hand. And ask.
Well, no. So two things, right? So if I'm calling on Maddie, you keep your hand down because that's her question. If you have a question you want to ask me, yeah, anytime. Yeah, don't. If I'm calling on person A, don't raise your hand. I want that person to answer. Don't whisper to them. I have very good hearing. I know you have group chats. I don't care, but I just don't want to hear the whispering. I know about the group chats. I know they exist. I don't want to see them. God, I don't want to see them. But I know they exist. All right. Where was I? Okay, so the purpose then of this opinion was, I think, to Chad's question, to sort of settle the property regimes in the United States. And Marshall's opinion was consistent with how both the states and the federal government viewed this issue. So Marshall wasn't sort of going out on a limb. He was more or less writing what the law was at this time. Right? So the holding of the case is easy. We'll get to the hard stuff in a minute, right? We're here almost 40 minutes for you to get to the actual holding, right? The holding of the case is easy. The transaction to Johnson from the Indian tribes was not valid. The Indians lacked the power to convey. The transaction to McIntosh from Congress was valid because the Congress was able to convey the property. Therefore, McIntosh was not trespassing. Johnson was trespassing, right? Johnson was trespassing in McIntosh's property. So judgment for McIntosh. All right, that's the easy part. I can teach that part with my eyes closed. Now comes the harder part. Any questions before we get to the hard part? All right, is that Victoria?
Yes.
Victoria, let me ask you. Unfortunately, I get the hard question, right? It was a girl named Marissa in the other class got the same question. She winced. It's funny you remember this stuff, but you know. Victoria, this is a weird case, right? Have you ever read a case in your semester of law school that looked like this before? Penoyer. Oh God, Penoyer. Oh, don't start me Penoyer. Okay, fair. Right, but Penoyer involved law or statutes, right? So Victoria, let me ask you a couple questions, right? Were there any statutes that resolved this case? Were there any common law precedents governing this case? Were there any cases cited? Have you ever read a law school case that cited no cases and no statutes? No, that's what I mean, right? This is a case unlike any other you've read. So is that Molly? Molly, why do you think it is that Marshall cited no cases, no statutes?
I think for the same reason that it was biased, so they didn't expand in their favor.
Well, so you think because you want to reach a certain result, is that what you're saying? Okay. It's a cynical reason, maybe a less cynical reason. Were there any cases that he could have cited? In other words, were there any cases governing how property is acquired?
I'm not sure if it's wrong with the discovery doctrine.
Okay, good. So we're going to discovery. We'll get to discovery in a minute. Is that a statute? Were there like the Uniform Discovery Code or like their statement of conquest?
No, I think, but the European side of the law had like a common understanding. That I think
Okay, now we're getting close to where I want to go. Okay, is that Marty? Marty, let me ask you this question, please. This is actually the question Marissa hated. How do courts decide cases?
Well, they've looked back at previous decisions.
Good. Are there any such decisions here?
No, there's no such decisions as I can tell, but there's things that have been done in the past by other.
Okay. And what gives a judge the license to look outside the case books, look outside the statute books, and look to these other things that were done? What gives a judge the power to even do that?
Well, if there's no precedent for them to go after, they need to base their decision on something.
They need, I think that's well said, right? They need to base a decision on something. Maybe Molly would say, no, they don't. They'll just do whatever they want. I think that's what you said a minute ago, right? I figured that. I don't see a name tag. I'm sorry. Lauren. Oh, I know you. Yes, hello. No, we emailed before, right? All right. So Lauren, when there's no precedent, no case law, no statute, judge got to rule based on something. What do they rule based on?
Things that have happened in their nations.
What gives the right for an American Supreme Court judge to look at stuff that happened in other nations? Where does that even? How do they even do that? How does it even work?
The foundations of our legal system are based on those.
Okay. And Trey, let me ask you this question. How is a judge supposed to know which foundations and other legal systems to even look to? I promise there's a point. It's coming to something.
How do they know which foundations and legal systems to look to?
Yeah, there's lots of countries around the world, lots of views. I don't think they consulted the Indian, Supreme Court, right? I'm only being slightly facetious, but they looked at a certain perspective.
Right. Honestly, I don't know in this case because it was the first instance that they had to deal with this.
So it's the first instance. The court's got to look to something, right? Right. So Trey, what did they look to? Tell me that much at least.
I think that, and I might be wrong, but I think that what they ended up looking to was a mistake in a sense, because they tried to base the decision on something that wasn't actually what had happened.
I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe be a little precise. I'm not following you.
So when they decided that the Native Americans did not have the right to that land to sell in the first place, that wasn't necessarily true, because they had the right, but only to sell to America. So I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say.
Me neither.
I think I'm talking in circles.
It's okay. It's all right. But I think I got your point, right? What's your name?
Zach.
Zach, let me ask you this question, okay? What are the principles, foundations, whatever you want to call them, right, that the Chief Justice discusses in his opinion to resolve this? You got to cite something, Marty said. You got to cite something, right? What are the principles that are cited to do something?
In the case?
Yeah, in the case.
Let's see. So they cite discovery and conquest.
Okay, let's do them one at a time. We'll do conquest in a minute. So discovery. Tell me, what is this discovery doctrine?
So basically, what he said is that discovery gave title to the government whose subjects discovered it, but then elaborated to say that it had to be the first Christian person to discover it, so the territory had been unknown to any Christians in the world. That's how they deal with the Native American issue.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thanks, Zach. So let me just break this down, right? So we have this thing called the discovery doctrine, right? And let's just be candid, right? Again, there's not much new soil on Earth, right? Again, if a volcano erupts in the ocean, okay, there's a new island, right? But for the most part, any land, any territory in existence was probably occupied, right? There are very few pockets of Earth that have been never occupied. They exist, rainforests perhaps, but virtually every area on Earth has been occupied at some point by people. So the notion of the discovery doctrine is a little bit of it's a little bit misleading, right? You're not actually discovering it. It's with the discovery that the caveat Zach added, you're the first Christian nation to discover it, right? And Marshall's pretty clear. He doesn't try and hide the ball on that. He says it over and over again, right? If you read the case, right? It says over and over again. He discovers the nation for Christianity. But Kyle? Is that Kyle? Kyle, what's the purpose, though, of the discovery doctrine? Why is that relevant?
It's relevant because it comes back when Johnson says that he has the claim of...
Forget Johnson. I'm showing in the abstract, right? Why is discovery doctrine relevant? Why is this an important doctrine?
It shows who has technically the right under this doctrine to...
Okay, so let's just say in 1492, Spain sends a ship, discovers an island. Then 5 years later, Portugal sends a bigger ship and discovers the same island. Whoa, how do you resolve that conflict?
Under the discovery doctrine, it would be the first Christian occupant.
Okay, now, did Portugal ever agree to this doctrine?
I don't think so.
So then, why do they honor it? You always see it in the movies, right? Where you go to an island and you plant your flag on the sand. You always see it in the movies, right? Saying you're first. Why would Portugal say, screw you, Spain? We have a bigger armada. We have a bigger navy. We're going to fight you for it. Why do we assume that discovery doctrine would be honored? Okay, that's John. Why do we assume, and by the way, if you're next up, listen carefully to the question, because you're probably next. Why do we presume that Portugal simply accept that Spain got the first theirs? Why is the discovery doctrine even agreed to?
Because of Portugal, like, claim to another plot of land they would want Spain to.
Oh, so it's good for me, good for you, right? I think John made a fair point. When you're talking about this discovery doctrine, it's never been written down, right? This is not like a statute or a treaty. This was a practice. This was a common practice that the countries agreed to. So you might ask, why would country A agree to let country B win? Because at some point the roles were reversed. Portugal will be the first country to discover some island somewhere, and they want Spain to honor it. Now, did the countries all honor the discovery doctrine? No. In fact, the reading I gave you earlier in class said Spain and France fought a war. Remember that? So don't pretend that Marshall thinks the discovery doctrine, it's all like, oh, you're here first, please, after you. No. Right? There were still disputes over land. Maybe people disputed which island they discovered. There were no GPSs back then. You know where you were, right? No, I was there. No, I was there, right? There was still conflict. But I think what we see with the discovery doctrine was it was designed to minimize conflicts, right? It's a bright line rule. Remember that one? You love bright line rules, right? It's a bright line rule. A bright line rule that if you are the first to discover the land among other Christian nations, it's yours. And this bright line rule settles disputes among the nations, and it avoids conflict. It avoids war. Again, there are going to be disputes over who actually was first, right? I don't want to pretend that didn't happen, but at least settle some disputes with clarity. Bright line rules have a benefit. They're clear. They're certain. You know what the rule is. Okay? Questions so far? All right, so we did discovery doctrine. Daniel, what's the other one, the other doctrine we talked about in this case? Tell me about conquest, please.
Conquest is the taking and keeping of certain lands.
Okay. Taking and keeping lands by use of force. Who is the force being applied to? In this case, at least.
In Johnson?
Yeah.
The Native Americans.
Do we have, does the case discuss how, well, let me take a step back, right? So Jason, we know at some point the Indians sold the land to Johnson, right? And we also know at some point the U.S. government claimed, no, we own the land. What was the root of the U.S. government's claim? Where did the U.S. government get the land from? They didn't buy it?
They acquired it from England in the Revolution.
Okay.
I think they tied that back to Cabot's discovery in 1492, I believe.
Well, it wasn't 1492, it was a little bit later, but right on, right? Right. So England claimed it through the discoverer Henry Cabot, who discovered all throughout the Americas. He never quite made it though to Illinois, right? So how do we, when you discover Virginia and the sort of the Northeast, does that mean you get the entire continent? Okay. So at some point though, there was a conflict of some sort, or maybe not. Maybe the theory was the entire continent, this is the manifest destiny to Chad's point, simply goes to the sovereign of the country, right? Marshall doesn't, walk through any of these details. This isn't like in, Hispaniola and the various islands in the Caribbean where there are actual conflicts. It's not clear exactly where the British government acquired this land from, other than the fact they kind of just, this is ours. Okay. Is that Cameron?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cameron, with the conquest doctrine, why do you think this doctrine was developed, or at least articulated?
Maybe in response to Native Americans not taking too well to their land being taken from them.
I think you're on the right track. Just spell it out a little bit more for me, please.
Well, if someone came and told me to get off my land, it's theirs now, I wouldn't just move over, I'd probably fight back.
What do you mean?
Well, if, can you repeat the question there?
Why do you think this conquest doctrine developed? In other words, why do you think discovery was not sufficient? Why can't you say, you know what? We're a Christian nation. We found, the island that's ours. Why did you need conquest on top of it?
Because I don't know, maybe discovery can only take you so far.
Okay, we're on the right track. What's your name?
It's Garrett.
Garrett. Why couldn't it just be that the European settlers showed up, said, okay, that's ours, and the native people said, sure, that's fine. We're going to just go along with it. Do you think that happened?
I don't think that would happen.
No. Why do you think that probably wouldn't happen?
Well, there'd definitely be some pushback.
Pushback. Okay, so just get a little bit more than pushback, I think.
Yeah, some violent pushback.
Why would it be violence?
I guess defending their land.
Yeah, they're trying to fight being occupied. Now, Marshall, what's your name, ma'am? Was there? Bailey. Okay, Bailey. Now, Marshall is pretty clear about why the native people couldn't just be sort of introduced or assimilated into society, right? What does he say?
He said that the tribes of Indians that were inhabiting were fierce savages whom occupation was war.
Again, so why do you think he used such harsh language to describe the native people? What was he trying to sort of anticipate? Marshall's a smart guy. He knew what he was doing. Why did he make that point so clearly?
Was it like a justification for the conquest itself?
Right. Why they needed conquest. In other words, if you have a warring people whose only means of interaction is fighting, they'll only respond to the sword. So it's almost like a justification, to use your word, of why conquest was needed, to basically beat them into submission. Because in a conquest, there's a winner and a loser, right? And the winner wins, and the loser loses. All right, everyone with me so far? So you have these two doctrines, right? And I just want to make sure you separate them, because I find often students sort of merge them and they conflate them, right? The discovery doctrine, right? The discovery doctrine is premised on a rule of first in time. When various European nations are exploring, the nation that gets there first keeps it. The discovery doctrine doesn't govern the relationship between the European nation and the natives, right? The relationship between the European nations and the natives is governed by the second doctrine, conquest. Conquest concerns when the European nation says, okay, we've now discovered this land, back off Spain, back off Portugal, it's ours. Now we're going to fight you to the death for it. Or starve them, or use disease, or whatever else, what their means were chosen. Okay? So again, in your notes, just keep separate the discovery and the conquest doctrine, right? They serve different purposes. I'll also just give you one other thing for your notes. Next class, starting on Tuesday, we're going to discuss hunting animals. Hunting animals, okay? It seems boring, but it's important. The discovery doctrine concerns land. The conquest doctrine concerns land. Do not, please, don't do it. Do not use discovery and conquest for hunting and other types of property. It only concerns new land involving native people, right? The stuff we're doing today doesn't carry over. It does in indirect ways, but the stuff we're doing today doesn't directly govern other things we'll be doing this semester. Yes, Alyssa, go ahead.
So the doctrine that would fall within Christopher Columbus taking over the United States would be the conquest, because they took it over by like war and disease and.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to do a history, lesson though, but Columbus has had several voyages. Unclear. Actually, I don't even know precisely when conflicts arose, but I think you can generally say that the European settlers used both discovery and conquest to sort of discover the Americas.
So So you can have both doctrines fall into.
And it was often blurry, which was which, right? Right. They often run together, but at least for your notes, I want to just keep them separate. Okay. Yeah, Joel, go ahead.
So we don't use the conquest doctrine anymore?
Well, you're gonna need to know because I'm teaching it to you, but you don't conquer a fox, right? You hunt the fox. There's different rules for animals and for peoples. Other question? Yeah. All right. Everyone with me? Okay. Now, we sort of discussed this issue, but I want to drill into a little bit more, right? Where do these discovery doctrines and conquest doctrines come from? Is that CA? Okay. Is that Caitlin?
Yes.
I can only see parts of letters, people's heads blocked, and it's not your fault. Sometimes people put them atop their laptops, which you don't have to do it. I think it's unnecessary, but it's easier for me to see. Yeah, it's because they block other stuff. Right. So, Caitlin, how did these doctrines of discovery and conquest come about? Well, I just want to focus on that point for a few more minutes.
I mean, obviously, as students move around, they need some way to justify their actions.
What do you mean some way to justify their actions?
So, things like this is mine now, like, there's this theory to back up what I am doing, my actions.
Mm-hmm. It's mine.
Yeah.
But why do you think the countries agreed to it?
Need some kind of roles to play.
But why do you have to have a rule, right? I think now we're getting the right track. What's your name? Janati. Okay. Why do you have to have some rule, right? Why can't it just be everyone for themselves, every country for themselves, and we just duke it out? I get it louder.
So like a social contract kind of.
Social contract. Okay. Yeah, tell me more. That's actually where I was going, but give me what do you mean by social contract?
They all kind of agree in the sense that it's not like by law or written, but they all agree and I think they should all follow that. So
Why would these countries reach this sort of social contract?
just I guess the idea that there's a basis and it's just I'm assuming it's not since not a lot of like they're not terrorists, like essentially just people are constantly fighting over land or property or whatnot.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then what's your name?
Second,
Was it?
second.
Becca, let me ask you a follow-up question. What would happen in the absence of this type of social contract where you didn't have any arrangement? What would our world look like if we didn't have these sorts of agreements?
Probably just mutual destruction.
Mutual destruction. Tell me more. What does that mean?
Well, if you're constantly fighting other groups that have what seems like a similar amount of human power, then you're probably just gonna end up, I don't know, overturning each other.
Okay. So what you're describing, or no, actually, no. What's your name?
Angela?
Angela, what is she describing where sort of mutually assured destruction where there's no property? What might we call that?
Anarchy?
Anarchy. There's a specific thing I'm looking for. I'm not sure if it's in the reading or not. Anyone? Just raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, war, but there's a state of nature. Who said it? Yeah, a couple of you. Okay, state of nature. I think there's the reading, right? So there's this concept in philosophy and other disciplines, and I swear this is not a philosophy class. But this part at least is important. I never took philosophy class in my life, so I know nothing. I take property classes though. There's this thing known as a state of nature, right? State of nature. And we think of the state of nature as a world of savagery, right? There's no government. There's no law. There's no police. Everyone is onto themselves, right? So imagine you wake up in the morning and whatever you have could be stolen. You could be killed and there's nothing to do about it. And then so how do you go about your life? You say, you know what, good for you, good for me. You start killing people to eat, right? You're something with the purge, kind of like that, right? Actually, I'm from Staten Island. When the purge was actually in Staten Island, which I think is very fitting. But imagine basically the purge where there's no law, you do whatever you want, and there'll be no repercussions. Joel, do you think that's the kind of world you want to live in?
No.
No. Tell me why not. It's an obvious answer. Why might that be the world you want to live in?
There's no order, there's no peace, and I don't think that's what God intended.
Okay, God didn't intend it. So then, what was the response to sort of leave that state of nature? How do you get out of that sort of dilemma where everyone's killing and stealing and acting violently?
The law?
The law. And what's the law?
Well, we make the law.
Okay. So what's the law?
Like, what's the question? Like, what's the law?
What is the law? That's my question for you.
It's a rule that we as a society follow to benefit everyone.
And what might be the most basic law to get us out of the state of nature?
No killing.
Okay, no killing. What else?
No stealing.
No stealing, right? And why is stealing problematic? What class are we in?
Oh, property.
There we go. Now you're getting there, right? For a criminal, you talk about murdering, right? For here, I want my property, right? Stealing. Ashley, what might be a very basic rule? If we were just starting on a blank slate, right? We wash ashore on a deserted island, right? It was a shipwreck, and this, Lord help us, the 80 of us wash ashore on a deserted island. Oh, God help us, we're screwed. We're all gonna die, right? But if we were trying to start a government, actually responsible human beings, what rule might we establish for property? The basic rule.
That you have the right to your own self.
Okay, that's a good rule. So you can't, kidnap someone. Okay, that's a good rule. What else? What other property rule might we establish?
I guess also like the facility, kind of like you have a right to like look immediately around you.
Okay, so Ash, I'll ask you a follow-up if I can. We're on a deserted island. You find a tree, and you pick some coconuts off the tree. Whose coconuts are those? Yours. Okay. What if those are the only coconuts in the island? There are 80 of us here.
I guess since you labored for those coconuts.
You labor for the coconuts, right? So Trey, let me give you a better example, right? Let's say we're on a deserted island, and then you learn how to fish. You throw a rock at a fish. I don't know how you fish, but you fish, right? You figure out some creative new way of capturing fish with your bare hands. You're a strong person. Can someone take your fish from you? You don't want to get angry. Right, so when we're deciding kind of how to structure society from scratch, is it obvious what rules we pick? Right, so you can imagine you can do it a couple different ways. You can say, whoever is the first to find the coconut gets to keep it, or whoever spends more time capturing the fish gets to keep it. Or you could have a communal approach and say, well, there are 80 of us here. Each of us need one coconut a day to survive. I'm making this up completely. Therefore, you chop up the coconuts 80 different ways. Right? There's no automatic, there has to be one rule or the other, although some rules might be better or worse. So let's just try and break them down, right? You're blocking, actually blocking it. Colin, what might be the advantage of you see it, you keep it, right? Ashley saw the coconuts, damn, those are hers. She has to share them with anyone. What might be the advantage of that rule? It's easy. Why is the you see it, you keep it rule so simple? Yeah, right? It's simple, right? There's no question of proof. Think of the discovery doctrine. If you see it first, my voice is all muffled, this thing, right? If you see it first, whereas I look like a duck with this thing, but my glasses don't fog. My glasses don't fog with this one, which is why I like it. If you ever want to try it, the duck ones, your glasses don't fog. Yeah, drives me nuts. This is why the round ones drive me crazy. These ones actually are easier to breathe in. So, Colin, let me ask you. The rule, if you see it, you find it, kind of like the discovery doctrine. That's really easy to apply. But what's the downside of the discovery doctrine? Where you see it, you keep it. What's the downside to that one? There's no way to say what? Well, let me change the hypo. Let's say Ashley has 80 coconuts. She finds all of them and she keeps them inside her hut and doesn't give them away to anyone else. What would be problematic with that? We're all starving to death. She's sitting on a mountain of coconuts. Why is that problematic? Do you think Ashley would stay safe? I'm sorry, I keep picking you. You're just the one. Do you think she would stay safe in the hut with all those coconuts under her hut? Keeping them to herself? No. I think I won't name names, but people would probably. You ever see Lord of the Flies? Yeah, something like that. Read that in middle school, I think. All right, Natalie, let me ask you a follow-up. So we have this doctrine that you see it, it's yours. So there's some pros and cons, right? The pro is it's certain, right? Certainty. This is a value we talk about a lot. Certainty is important. We want rules that are easy to apply, bright line rules. You see it's yours. The downside is it can lead to waste, right? She's not using the coconuts in a productive fashion. They're just sitting. One human being can't eat all those coconuts. Natalie. So next we might call the labor theory. Trade with his fishes, right? What's the labor theory?
The labor theory is this person who puts the most labor into the land.
Okay, good. So labor theory is, by the way, it's developed by a philosopher. You've probably heard of John Locke. I'm sure most of you have heard of him. I'll see people are nodding. Sort of like Mr. Burns. That's in the picture. John Locke was a very famous philosopher, and he developed this concept called labor theory. The idea was you own yourself, right? You have ownership of yourself, and whatever else you sort of use with your hands, you mix your labor with it, it becomes yours. So if you take your hands, you thrust it into the ocean, you pull out a fish, you've now captured the fish through a labor conquest, or a labor theory. If you plant seeds and you till the soil and you fertilize it and you water it and crops grow, that's now yours. Right? Ashley, who just picks coconuts off the floor, right? Maybe there's a little bit of labor involved, but it was not very much, right? She could just pick the coconuts off the floor. So come back to Natalie. Now with the labor theory, what's the advantage of rewarding Trey spends all this time, trying to hunt fish? What's like the reason why that might be a positive rule?
It would be more efficient as a society.
Yeah, rewards efficient use of resources, right? If he's going to spend all of his time sitting in the ocean all day, grabbing fishes, he should be rewarded for it, right? Imagine, Natalie, what happens if Trey's hunting for hours, he catches a fish, and sorry, we're going to take it from you. Did he actually spend hours hunting if he does that? Nope. Excuse me. Stamina, voice. I was getting my voice going again with the teaching. It's things you don't think about. A lot, and I have to project even more with the mask on. So sorry with all the water, right? So with labor theory, the pro is it rewards the efficient use of resources. It creates incentives, if you will, for people to use their labor effectively, right? The downside, though, Marissa, what might be the downside of the labor theory? Why might that be an ideal theory?
People may not agree on if someone, I think you gave an example in the book about the manure in the public street where someone traded away and then they left it in the night and they came back and someone had rolled it off. And so people might not agree on who put more labor into it.
Excellent, very good. There are questions of fact. The labor theory is not a bright line rule. Right? The labor theory is not a bright line rule. Do we really know how long Trey was hunting in the ocean for? There were no cameras, there's no smartphones back then. We have no idea. And then Morgan, let's try the third one, right? Maybe a communal approach, that whatever you catch, you have to chop up 80 ways. What are the pros and cons of that approach?
A pro would be we all survive, I guess.
If that, assuming that there's enough, right?
Yeah. And I guess it would promote a more successful community overall.
Okay. What's the con?
Con. That little cut of coconut might not be enough. Whereas.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you know you're getting one coconut a day, no matter how hard you work, how might that affect your dedication to the collective? Yeah, my free ride, right?
Yeah.
You ever had group work in college, group projects? Yeah, I've been there, right? It doesn't change when you graduate, right? It's the same everywhere. So when you're dealing with a communal approach, the ostensible pros is everyone gets some. The con is there may not be enough to go around, right? You may run out of things. All right. So the labor theory is usually associated with John Locke. The sort of first in time theory is associated with two other people. One is Samuel Pufendorf, 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 and Hugo Grotius. I don't have a picture of Grotius, but Pufendorf or Grotius. These are famous philosophers who we'll come back to over and over again this semester. All right, everyone with me? Questions so far? No. I want to go back to Johnson for a few more minutes and go through one point. So we know that the Indians couldn't buy and sell. They lack capacity, like a little kid who lacks capacity. But the Indians could do something on the land. Is that Morgan or is it Victoria's next? Victoria, sorry. Victoria, what could the Indians actually do on the land? They couldn't buy it. They couldn't sell it. What could they actually do?
They were occupying it.
Occupying. What does that mean? They can occupy it.
They were living on the land and using the land they didn't own it.
Why do you think they were allowed to occupy the land?
Because it was easier for the settlers that way than just having too much war and making them.
Ah. What would have happened if they couldn't occupy the land?
War.
They got to go somewhere, right? Now, did Marshall say there's an absolute right to occupy the land forever? No. Do you think they are on that land today? Are they still chilling in Chicago? No, they're not. I think at some point they were told to leave. Yeah, they were. So the sort of sad conclusion of the case is, the court says they can't buy or sell, but they can occupy it, but only for so long as the government lets them occupy it for them. And I think Morgan, or Victoria is exactly right. They were allowed to occupy it to avoid conflict. Like, okay, you stay here, you farm it, you hunt on it, you keep the land, used. But when the time comes, you're gonna have to leave. And that is the history, right? Eventually, the various Indian tribes were moved out west, the Trail of Tears. They were put on reservations, and various things were done to them. There's a reference that even later, Justice Marshall, by the way, I teach con law as well, constitutional law. Marshall is so overrated. He's probably the most overrated justice of all time. I mean that sincerely. His opinions aren't that good. Not just this one, other ones as well. Marbury, totally wrong. Just trust me on this one. You'll see next semester. He's way overrated. Does not deserve the reputation he gets. I mean that sincerely. Oh yeah, Pierre.
Yeah.
I'll defend that one to the death. I mean that one.
I have basically two questions.
Sure.
First, if this case has ever been overturned.
Nope.
And second, do you think that if this case was happened today, the outcome would be completely different?
Oh, what a smart question. I have no idea. I mean, it's hard to imagine because we have 200 years of federal law behind us. And also we don't have, unoccupied territory. So I have no idea. But this decision was not controversial for the time it was decided. It was probably considered emphatically correct. It was unanimous with no dissent. That's a good question. Trey?
So I remember reading an opinion, given the right to occupy peacefully, and they basically decide what the definition of peacefully is.
What case are you talking about? In this one? Right, yeah. I thought you said you read a different case. Yeah. They're basically, if you think of it like, I don't want to say a tenant because a tenant does have a vested right to stay. So you probably have leases to your apartments. You have a 1-year lease, a 2-year lease. That's yours. But if you misbehave, the landlord can move to evict you. If you don't pay your rent or you create damage or you do various things, you can be evicted. So even if you're renting an apartment, you can be removed. I suppose the difference is there's some judicial process decides whether removal is proper. Here, it's like, all right, get out because we say so. Okay, good point. Questions? All right. Yes, Sophia, go ahead.
In the notes, I was talking about how they kind of did initially the government did initially recognize Indians as having rights, but then over time, like 30 years, when the Johnson case was decided, that had been kind of completely switched opposite.
I think that's right. At various points, different governments have had different arrangements with Indians, right? Initially, they might have been peaceful. They made agreements with them, and when those agreements are no longer convenient, they breached them. I think it's safe to say that it's a very unfortunate part of our history, and it's discussed in the reading. And to this day, the Supreme Court is still deciding the meaning of various treaties with Indian nations signed 100 years ago. So I don't think this school offers a class in Indian law. Some schools do. I think you can actually, don't quote me this, but I think you can actually ask to take classes remotely at other schools that do offer Indian law class. So if there's something that interests you, inquire. But this school, I don't think has an Indian law class. Yes, Armin, go ahead.
Do you know what it was that made that shift take place? Over 30 years, how did it?
I think it was a matter of convenience. The United States was originally kind of on the coast and started moving west and west and west, and they needed the land. This is Chad's point earlier. I don't think there's much more to it than that. Yes, Amadi, go ahead.
So, in the reading, it was saying that the government had the power to take the occupancy rights by conquest or by basically purchasing from them. And so if they didn't have the capacity to form contracts, how would they willingly give away their occupancy rights, basically getting into a contract?
It's a good question. It's probably wrong to call them rights in the first place because that suggests they existed. It's more like a privilege, right? The same way that if you invite someone to your land, like an invitee or a licensee, if you remember that from torts, right? If you invite a plumber into your house to fix your toilet, they're there just for that reason. And when they're done fixing the toilet, they got to leave or else they're trespassing. I think that's a better model than calling a tenant, maybe an invitee or licensee. Yeah, Jason.
Did the government strip the Native Americans from the property that was on that land as well?
Well, the land is the property. I'm not sure what you're talking. You're talking about the structures in the land?
Like the structures and the crops and etc.
So the usual rule is whoever owns the land owns whatever's on top of it and what's below it, right? There's an old expression, when you own land, you own up to the sky and down to the hell, right? Sure. So I think if they had any structures, they simply gave those up. Yeah, Pierre.
Whenever you gave the example of the coconut, two things resonated on my mind because first, obviously, capitalism and communism, because you said, obviously, if you get a coconut, it's yours because you found it. It's not, the coconut doesn't belong to everyone. In some countries, that might be different because of, that communism politics that they follow. So do you think that, I know in the case they don't mention anything about capitalism, but that case, do you think somehow was decided or was based on those capitalistic policies that have shaped this nation since the very beginning?
Sure. I mean, this is an 1820 case. I know that communism marks came much, much later, so I'm not sure if that was even a known. Socialism would be more accurate. But I do think that it was more of mercantilism, if you want to be precise. But I do think the sort of capitalist or what we call mercantilist theories would definitely pervade the 18th century, 1800s. Yeah, good point. All right, questions. Yeah, I like all the questions. It's good. I like questions. All right, let me just wrap up by going through the syllabus, sort of looking ahead and sort of giving an overview of the class. I have a few minutes left. The first class, okay, this one's done. On Tuesday, we begin talking about hunting animals. Why hunting animals? It's a very basic way of acquiring property. The animals running around different places. It's a very fun topic. Then move on to capturing resources like oil and gas. We talk about creation. What if you write an article, you create a patent or a copyright, intellectual property? Then move on to property in your cells, the Moore case, which involves rights to organs in your body. We talked then about finders, keepers, and gifts. So the first 8 classes, I'll admit, are pretty easy, right? If you're struggling now, buckle up, right? Because in class 9, things get harder, right? We introduced the topic of estate, which takes up almost half the class. This is the idea of who owns property, when they own it. It's a very complex topic. So just when you're planning your schedule, just pay very close attention to these. I think, there's 11 pages of reading in this class. It's very short, but there's a lot of important things. We do Estates in class 9, estates in class 10, estates in class 11. If you notice, no readings here, we're just reviewing, just going back and doing old stuff. Then more estates, more estates, more estates, more estates, more estates. Right before spring break, we'll have a midterm on the 8th in class. We'll do it right here. God willing, we're in person, so I hope so. And then the next class, that Thursday, I'll go over it. My tentative plan is if you want to go over your midterm with me, I'll have Zoom hours during spring break and afterwards in person. The building's closed. But I have 170 students, so we have to be very creative with scheduling. There are just a lot of papers, but we'll make it through. After spring break, we talk about co-ownership. There's a canceled class here. Just note that on the 24th. Co-ownership, and we do marital property for a few classes. And we finish up with leaseholds and landlord-tenant. And the last class will have an exam, a final exam review. Okay. The semester will fly by so quickly. All right. I'll be up in my office in a few minutes. If you have any questions, anything you want to ask me now? Okay, and the cookies. I will bring the cookies to the front of the room. I know you didn't forget. If there are any left over, please bring them down to the lounge. I don't want to take any home. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all later. Thanks so much.